Major support for Carolina Business Review is provided by Grant Thornton. Operating in more than 100 countries, our tax, audit, and advisory professionals specialize in helping companies unlock their growth potential. Novant Health, bringing you world-class technology, clinicians, and care when and where you need it. And Sunoco, a global manufacturer of consumer and industrial packaging products and provider of packaging services with more than 300 operations in 35 countries.
Our towns and cities from all corners of the two Carolinas have more in common than you might think, especially around growth, vitality, and that all-elusive reputation. But what's the possible cost of ignoring that commonality and going it alone? Welcome, and thank you for supporting the longest-running and the most widely watched source of Carolina business and public policy issues for over 25 years. I'm Maura Quinn, sitting in for Chris William. In our municipalities, large and small, the group we look to for the voice of business is the Chamber of Commerce. Chambers keep a pulse on local and state business, economic development, and issues that impact education and public policy. How can we leverage that influence? In just a moment, chamber leaders from Wilmington, Columbia, York, and Asheboro jump into this week's dialogue.
Gratefully acknowledging support by Blue Cross Blue Shield of South Carolina. Please visit us at southcarolinablues.com. The Duke Endowment, a private foundation enriching communities in the Carolinas through higher education, healthcare, rural churches, and children's services. Barings, a leading global asset management firm dedicated to meeting the evolving investment and capital needs of its clients. Learn more at barings.com. On this edition of Carolina Business Review, Carl Blackstone from the Columbia Chamber of Commerce, Linda Brown of the Asheboro Randolph Chamber of Commerce, Natalie English from the Wilmington Chamber of Commerce, and Rob Youngblood of the York County Regional Chamber of Commerce.
Hello and welcome to Carolina Business Review. Boy, there is a lot to cover on this topic, and we're going to jump in with a question that actually is kind of tough, maybe. It's, not an easy question. So let's start with reputation, right? It's something that is of concern of all cities, all towns, and of the state. So Carl, let's start with you. Talk to me about the landmines that might be on the horizon if we don't really address reputation for cities, towns, and the state.
Well, we all live and breathe by reputation, so whether it's economic development, tourism, Columbia is a college town, and so the impact that the university has and its role in our community is vital. And so you look at other parts of the country that have had some type of catastrophic event, whether it's a social or Mother Nature coming in, how you respond to those challenges. Charleston is forefront in my mind, and how they responded in the correct way, and they bridged a gap. There was a dark time. It could have been a darker time for their community, but really flipped it into something positive. We're both states, North and South Carolina, are dealing with issues right now. They're not always favorable in the press, whether it's ethics issues or some political issues that y'all might have in North Carolina. It's how we respond, because those issues are coming up, and it's just cyclical. Who's next? But it's keeping the open dialogues within our communities, with our political leadership, with the business community, and making sure that we are ready to address those when they come.
Right, and Natalie?
Yeah, I think sometimes it's the landmine you don't expect. So I think those of us, especially in coastal communities, we're always thinking about how will we respond. And I'd like to think that we would respond as well as Charleston in any of those kinds of situations. It's the things that you're not expecting that kind of hit you upside the head in the middle of the night or the middle of a legislative session, and you have to respond. And so I think always staying on top of issues and people, and having a good pulse on who the lawmakers are at whatever level, who the business leaders are at in all of our communities, and then knowing each other well enough to know when I don't know everything. I've quickly admitted that to my new staff in Wilmington, but I know who does, and so quickly getting with that person to help address issues that surprise you. Yeah,
so surprises. Rob, any surprises for you?
Yeah, well, the one I wanted to talk about is a man-made issue, or a person-made issue, and we joked before the show about what we'd shouldn't cover related to North Carolina and our respective state. And I did not agree that we wouldn't bring up HB2.
I knew you were going to do it.
But I feel like that we would be remiss not to, and I'll just say that I think this idea of inclusion and supporting diversity is so important to our reputation now and in the future. And I think we've seen a lot of examples of what happens when that's not done, economically, socially, politically. And I don't know that we're certainly not done with that issue. And the same issue came up in the South Carolina legislature. And kudos to our governor at the time, Nikki Haley, for squelching that and squashing that issue before it got to a certain point. And thank goodness our legislative group was able to put an end to that for right now. But I think we need to constantly be aware of the need to include people of different backgrounds, orientations, race, so on and so forth.
Okay, Linda?
Well, I agree. I think a lot of it has to do with consulting with our neighbors and friends across the state in North Carolina when HB2 became an issue. I was really proud to see how people rose to the occasion, and you had different industries. All of a sudden you're hearing voices you're not accustomed to hearing. And so I think it was a great process to go through. And I think the way business industry responded, certainly the sports industry, the colleges came out, the travel industry, the tourist destinations, and it was a great thing to see all these people coming together, and you find out you have a lot more in common than not. Whether it's rural or urban, found there were a lot of people that kind of sing in the same song. So
Right. So you've brought up rural and urban. So there is a rural-urban divide. The Brookings Institutions came up with a study that said poverty is spreading from the urban areas into the suburbs. Do you find that the rural-urban divide is a real thing? And how is it impacting the work of the chambers?
it's almost like the Uber community and everybody else. You know, the big cities, and then those, even the smaller, larger cities are feeling the impacts that rural communities alone used to feel in the past. And, you know, a lot of it, again, has to do with partnerships and people we choose to work with and how we address those needs. And we've made some great partnerships, and I'm kind of excited about some of the things we've seen in that direction.
You know, rural flight has been happening for decades. Exacerbated in the last couple of years, at least in the eastern part of both of our states with Matthew and the floods of 2015 in South Carolina. There's communities that 70–80% of their town was flooded out. It's going to be challenging to rebuild those communities. Getting companies to relocate in some rural parts is tough. Education systems in those rural communities also are lagging behind. It's got to be addressed, and there's not an easy fix there at all. But you're going to have these trends of population movement, but the South is growing considerably, and we've got to find a way. Technology is going to allow us to do things that we couldn't have done before.
I prefer to talk about an urban-rural connection.
Yeah.
And find the ways that we don't have to be divided. We are all one economy in the state of North Carolina, in the state of South Carolina. And so as a 20-year resident of Mecklenburg County, I grew up in Halifax County, one of the 5 poorest counties in the state, and now I'm in Wilmington in New Hanover County, which is a growing, bustling community. And what we've done in Wilmington, and I think we did well here in Charlotte also, is to reach out to the chambers in our region. Rob and I have known each other for years. Right. In this part of the state. We've reached out, we've created an economic development marketing initiative so that the 14 economic development organizations in our community came together to develop messaging and a campaign, Choose Cape Fear. Because it's not just, we don't want you to just choose Wilmington. Right. We don't want you to just choose Brunswick County. We want you to choose Brunswick County, Pender County, Columbus County, New Hanover County, our beaches. We want you to relocate your business because you can do anything in that 4-county region. And those counties who didn't have the assets and the resources to create that campaign are appreciative that we took that on because the urban community has more resources, whether it's money, expertise, the companies who can give free services, but it's not just ours. We're sharing it with the region, and the ways we can solve this and stop being divided is to truly work together and create the kinds of partnerships that the Regional Transportation Committee in the Charlotte region has, and like the Choose Cape Fear campaign, and I'm sure that you guys have similar things too.
Yeah.
So there is, in the legislature, at least in North Carolina, there is a move to try to take some of the money that is being generated in the urban areas and spread it to the more rural areas. What do you think about that, and how do you think that will work? Will that be a productive? Will that work? Will that be productive?
As I've shared with legislators, I don't think that's the answer to create economic growth in those communities, and that's what they need. What they don't necessarily need money to build a new school. What they need is help to recruit industry. And so what I'm encouraging legislators in North Carolina to do is look at what are some policies, some infrastructure investments that can be focused in rural communities without taking revenue in a redistribution effort that would then prohibit the urban areas from investing, because it's the state's economy. It's all the state's economy.
I don't think redistribution has ever worked, quite frankly. I think the investment in infrastructure is key. That's the biggest impediment to bringing in companies to a region, is the infrastructure cost. Incentives. Incentivizing companies to put their businesses in rural communities, I think, is a good plan. It's worked, at least in South Carolina. Totally agree. Redistribution is tough. It's a tough sell.
Okay, Linda?
I completely agree. I think that redistribution sounds good, but it's hard to do, and it creates unintended consequences for those larger communities that it takes the income away from. And incentives, boy, we would love to have some state-sponsored incentives to help bring an industry and business and allow them to locate in North Carolina. You know, other states use us against ourselves when they're out marketing. Well, you don't want to consider North Carolina. They can offer you what we can, and we would like to level the playing field where that's concerned.
South Carolina does a pretty good job with incentives.
Well, we do, but there's a pending issue, and I know we want to speak positively, but another great example of unfortunate example, but another example of what you said with urban-rural is the poorer school districts that are in urban areas of South Carolina have sued the state for funds. And again, there's the issue of redistribution and how do we handle that. And I think all the points that were made I agree with. I think we need to focus on that and find a solution for that, but not to, I think we want to bring those school districts up to communities, and instead of bringing other high-achieving school districts like the ones in York County, instead of bringing those down, I think we need to work to bring the others up, and our goal is to raise all, and as we raise the ones that need the most attention or resources.
And I think you'll hear business people, at least the ones I talk to, who, while they want to lower the cost of doing business, and taxes are certainly a part of the cost of doing business, they do not want to do that at the cost of infrastructure investments and education. And they will tell you they'll pay higher taxes to ensure we're developing their workforce and we're investing in infrastructure.
I mean, those are the big two challenges as we continue the next 20 years. Urban Land Institute at least says Columbia is going to grow by 400,000 people. We have communities that have grown 81% in the last 10 years around Columbia. Infrastructure, education, workforce. I mean, those two issues alone could drive debates for years, but investing now is a lot cheaper than waiting 10 years to try to backfill what you got. So the workforce, I think both states see that as a tremendous challenge as we move forward with people coming, with low unemployment rates in both states, and jobs are companies want to move here. You're right about investing in those rural schools. We need those kids to do well so they can take the jobs that we have.
So talk to me some about health care. So Medicare and Medicaid funding. So Medicaid funding in the news, possible repeal of Obamacare. So what impact does health care have in terms of bringing business here and lifting up the states?
Well, healthcare itself is a huge economic development driver, and with the discussion of who builds the next hospital in York County, that's been an interesting discussion, and it's generated a lot of interest and I think revenue and attention to our area. But I think it's essential to the area. Not only is that a huge provider of jobs, well-paying jobs, highly technical, generally high-paying jobs. I think healthcare is essential to that, and it's essential that we keep our employees productive and well, and I think it's a huge issue.
I think this is one we've talked about regionalism, and we've talked about states working, or counties working together, the state working with it. I think this is one area around healthcare where having deals with North Carolina and South Carolina would improve. We've got a nursing shortage that it's just crazy. We have hospitals that are flying in nurses just for weekend care just to have enough coverage. Yeah. We're not producing enough. And this may be an issue that we could work across state lines to say, North Carolina, here's our need over the next 10 years for healthcare workers. We need your help in supplying these. And I think looking beyond our borders will help fix this, could help be a solution to this problem.
I think that the whole healthcare issue is so complicated, and so few people truly understand it, and they have a perception that providers are all in it for themselves, right. and so it's not just communicating community to community, but industry to industry, so that we all have a full appreciation of the insurance business and the healthcare businesses, and then having a better ability to impact the policies as they're being debated at the state and federal level.
Well, the big thing is access to care. You've got so many un- and underinsured people in communities, and especially rural communities, where a community hospital is one of your main economic development engines. I mean, it employs usually one of the largest employers, the highest paid average jobs, and yet you've got a lot of people in your community who don't have access to care because they don't have insurance or they're underinsured, and you have an aging workforce of physicians. You have the nursing issues that you talked about, and then when Medicaid wasn't expanded in North Carolina, that created, that just made a bad problem even worse. And it took over 200 years to get our healthcare delivery system where it is today, and to try to disentangle that and create something new all at one time, that didn't work real well. And so now we're all working together and trying to make it work for communities, and that's a difficult thing.
Do you advocate for Medicaid expansion dollars?
Our state didn't take it either. It's one of those, there's such a political divide. I mean, I think it needs to be a focus on outcome-based reality here. What is the intended outcome that we would like to see? Obviously, there's about 60% of Obamacare that works perfectly great. Yep. Let's focus on the 40% that's not working, try to tweak that system a little bit more. How you divide that between the states that didn't take the expansion versus those that did, that's where we are. I mean, that's the rub. And how you divvy up the money, I don't know. It's a fight.
Yes.
Our chamber did support the expansion, and we felt it was unfortunate that our state left money on the table, federal dollars on the table, for to choose not to expand. So we would still support that. And again, I think access to care is very important. But having access to care is one thing, but having quality care is another thing. And I think that's why it's also so important. And North Carolina does a better job than South Carolina on this in supporting their institutions of higher education, particularly in the technological areas. But we've got to train our healthcare, all of our professionals, but particularly our healthcare people. We want to make sure they're trained and hopefully homegrown, and that we have good access, but also good access to quality professionals in that area.
Well, and I think that as Rob said earlier, it is an economic driver. As Linda said, it is the economic driver in many communities. Yep. And so for business and individuals to not think about health care as as a standalone entity, it really is driving and will continue as the South continues to grow rapidly. That industry will have to keep up, and so we're going to see great job growth in that sector.
So let's switch gears and talk about transportation. So in South Carolina, the big issue is the highway funding package, and North Carolina, the bond package. So are we doing enough to try to fix transportation issues? Let's start with South Carolina. So let's start there.
Can we say hell on this show? I would say hell no.
Not only no,
but yes. And Carl, I could see the bags under his eyes as well. We've stayed up late lobbying our legislators with the local or the recent discussion, and it's passed in the House. A great bill passed in the House that was veto proof of all of our governors. And the bill a negotiated bill was just passed in the Senate. Unfortunately, it had a lot of different things like tax cuts. I mean, tax cuts are great, but a lot of other things that have watered it down a bit. But still, it is a substantial increase and hopefully a long-term addition of funds. It still needs to be negotiated and go through the process. But our roads throughout our state, locally in York County, we've got the local pennies, the sales tax that have helped us. But statewide, we have to have better roads for tourism, economic development. We've got to be able to move product from one place, from the factory or the industry to where it needs to go. And it's vitally important, but we're not there yet, when hopefully we're getting closer to doing better.
South Carolina, we live by our port in Charleston, and it's the biggest opportunity for us growing as a state. We've seen significant economic development projects come to South Carolina because of the port. We're investing millions and millions into harbor deepening as well as to expand our port. If we can't get our goods and services from their factories to the port, then we've missed an opportunity, right? We're wasting money. So we've got to invest. I think the legislature is going to have a bill out at the end of this month that will allow us to expand. We're going to see a significant push of cash into building the roads. There are not enough contractors to build the roads that we need or repave, so that's a big issue.
Yeah.
But it's going to create a demand. We'll see some more companies moving in just to do those roads, but it's vital. But it's an economic development issue. It's a safety issue, and we've been talking about it a long time, so I think this is the year.
Yeah, okay. And in North Carolina, bond package, can they get it done, or do they have bigger fish to fry?
I think it's one of the biggest fish they need to fry. And gosh, it was probably 12, 13 years ago that the DOT assessment in North Carolina was $65 billion in unmet needs. We haven't spent $65 billion since then, and the needs have just continued to grow. So my guess is that number's probably bigger. I don't know for sure, but we have to figure it out. Tying back to the urban-rural conversation, under Governor McCrory's administration, a vision was created for transportation for North Carolina that took a look at that. And if we are ensuring we're investing in our infrastructure, ports, roads, airports, we have a port too that we're competing with you guys with, and if we're investing in all of those things, then all the people, all the jobs, the companies, they will continue to come. If we don't, we are basically saying we don't want any more people here. We don't want any more jobs here. It's critical that we figure it out. And that strategic vision of investing in North Carolina's transportation needs said, Wilmington might be the center of the southeast region of North Carolina, but Myrtle Beach is right there, right? Charlotte is the center of a region that dips into another state. Greensboro dips into another state. And so that truly looked at the fact that this isn't something we can solve all by ourselves. That's Again, right. If there are no jurisdictional lines that we can't literally build a wall. Just saying.
So we're nearing the end of the show, so I want to give all of you a chance to give us some final thoughts. So tell me what you are optimistic about in terms of your state, your chamber, and what we might be able to do in terms of cooperation. And Linda, I'll start with you since you didn't weigh in on the last.
Well, I'm really excited about things that we've set in motion the last few years in Randolph County. We spent considerable time on the Randolph County strategic plan, focusing on health, well-being, and public safety. And we've got great opportunity there, and I'm really excited about moving the needle on that.
Okay, and one line because we're at 1 minute.
Sorry.
So, Carl?
I'm just excited about all the growth we're seeing in the Carolinas, period, across both states. There's a vitality that's here now that we haven't seen, so I think there's great opportunity ahead of us.
Great. Okay, Rob.
Well, our bright spot in our state government has been our economic development, our commerce department. Kudos to them, and keep up the good work, and let's keep this growth going.
Great. Natalie?
I'm really excited about the momentum and excitement in Wilmington and the Cape Fear region, that we are all working together to convince folks that choosing Cape Fear as a place to live, to do business, not just to vacation, is what they should do.
All right. I can't thank all of you enough for being here and tackling some really tough topics. Thank you.
Thank you.
On behalf of everyone here at Carolina Business Review, thank you so much for being with us, and have a really great week.
Thank you.
We can talk now.
Major funding for Carolina Business Review was provided by the Duke Endowment, Bearings, Grant Thornton, Novant Health, Sunoco, Blue Cross Blue Shield of South Carolina, and by viewers like you. Thank you. Promotional consideration provided by Business North Carolina Magazine. For more information, visit carolinabusinessreview.org.